Hi, this is what we are baking today, a nice no-knead bread, and this is what you can expect after following this tutorial. It all starts with a really healthy starter. That's why I'm preparing my starter in the evening. I want to start baking in the morning, and I hope that my starter overnight time is going to expand or double in size. That's a sign of a good and healthy starter. That's definitely something you need. I'm gonna be baking 2 loaves of bread of each 500 grams, so that's why I need around 200 grams of starter for the morning. I end up having a lot of discard starter, and what I do is I take that discard starter and put it in the fridge, and then I'm also baking a nice discard bread, starter bread from time to time. I'm gonna link it here. The other starter for the baking, I'm putting it to the coldest place in my kitchen because it has around 8 hours and I don't want it to be too fast. And you can see with the rubber band, it doubled in size almost. I think it doubled. You just can't see it here, or I might have not properly placed the rubber band. But yeah, it's looking very healthy. You have those nice pockets of air. So then let's get started. Since I'm baking 2 loaves, I'm going to be using 1,000 grams of flour. You want to use bread flour or all-purpose flour. In Germany, that's type 550. I'm using an Italian flour, but it's actually a German flour. It was just the only thing I could find in the supermarket during those times. And you see me here, this happens a lot. I just use a little bit of too much flour. I like to be very precise when baking. Now I'm adding the salt. That's 20 grams of salt, or 2% calculated based on the amount of flour that you're using. So assuming you just want to bake 1 loaf, then just half those ingredients. Now we are adding the starter, 200 grams of starter. And that's almost depleting my complete jar. But that's completely okay. You can just let your starter regrow, and it's actually healthy to do this from time to time. Almost completely deplete. Just a tablespoon is enough to get your starter going again. Now mix in the water, and then afterwards we just need to start mixing everything by hand. We're not actively kneading this, we're just going to be mixing it until it comes together. I recommend everybody to use your hands for mixing, and I would not recommend to use a kitchen machine or so to do this. Reason being, you get a much better feeling for your dough. You wouldn't get the same feeling if you're using a kitchen machine or so. And you really want to develop this feeling so that you know when your dough is ready. How does your dough feel? Is your dough too sticky? Does it have the right consistency? And this is just something that can't be written down in a recipe. It's just something that you learn over time when baking bread. At the start, I was thinking, yeah, everything can be measured and scaled perfectly, but unfortunately not. Every flour is unique, so you just need to over time follow your instinct basically. And yeah, since every flour is unique, it could be that some flour from the same batch performs a little bit different because it might be from a different farmer, the flour or so. And keep track of your recipes, note them down, but chances are that if you just change one variable, that they might not exactly work the same again. So that's why kneading by hand is so important. You just get a good feeling for your dough. I'm mixing it until I don't have any large chunks of flour anymore, because then in the end, when baking, it does not feel very nice. It's not nice to eat just chunks of flour. So this is a little bit of work. I'm doing this for around 3 minutes overall. I'm just speeding things up because I did not want to bore you out. But I can promise you that in the end, the results are going to be amazing, and they have been totally worth it. Since this is a no-knead bread, I'm just gonna stop right here, and then I'm just gonna let the dough rest for 1.5 hours, and the gluten is going to absorb all the water and your dough is going to come together. This is the gluten in the wheat flour. With rye or similar flours, it wouldn't work. Spelled is similar to wheat, but yeah, this is only just for wheat-based flours. And now have a look, 1.5 hours passed, and how nicely the dough already came together. Look at that. I'm just gonna fold it over a little bit, because what I want to do is I want to put some shape into it on the bench. This is not needed. No need, not needed. This is not needed. But I just wanted to try this because I saw this in another recipe, and it's easy and it actually allows you to practice shaping of the final bread a little bit. And I was amazed. This was a lot of fun. I like this process. No flour needed. Now you want to start wetting your hands, and you can start pulling the dough out. Oh, it's very sticky. I just realized. Pull it out, flip it over, and now go to the other side. Flip this one over too. Almost like if you were shaping. So I kind of enjoyed this exercise because it allowed me to also practice my shaping a little bit. And it's very, very sticky, but that's what you want. You want to pull the dough and you want to flap it on top of each other. And now just imagine yourself, you're creating tiny networks of gluten all the time, tiny layers of gluten all the time. So with each time, your dough is going to get stronger and stronger. Those started to stick again to my hands. I'm just wetting my hands again. Cold water works best. And one more time, flip it over and roll it over. Actually, you don't have to roll it over. I'm just doing that because that's the same that you do in the actual final shaping in the end. You can just repeat the first method that I showed you. Just do that 3 or 4 times. It's going to give your dough really, really, really nice strength. And I'm just messing a little bit more with the dough just because I feel this is a nice exercise. It's up to you. It depends. The more you do this, the more strength you get into your dough, almost like kneading, basically. But the more work it is for you, of course. I would recommend to do at least 4 times. But if you want to just practice shaping a little bit, then this is a great exercise. And just look at how nicely the dough is already coming together. It looks great. And it almost does not stick anymore. I'm just going to speed this up. I've done this just a few more times, but I didn't want to bore you. I was just getting all excited about this way of learning how to shape. Now it goes back to the container and it's going to ferment in your container for another 3 hours. And that's how it looks another 1.5 hours in. I'm going to show you one more technique, which is called the coil fold technique. You don't have to do this, but I just wanted to show you because it also shows how nicely your dough already came together. Again, water your hands. I'm removing the edges from the container. And now see how you can flip this dough over. I'm just doing it 2 times from this side. And this creates so much more strength. I find this to be the best way to stretch and fold. Again, you could also skip them if you were lazy. I just like to do this as a way to see whether my dough came together or not. But this dough is looking very smooth and silky already, so it's definitely gonna be a good dough. This phase is called bulk fermentation. Bulk because you might ferment dough for multiple loaves, which is also what we are doing. We're gonna be baking 2 loaves right here. In general, the bulk fermentation is complete when your dough has doubled in size. So in my case, that's around 5 hours, but it could be that it's slightly more or less for you. Wait until your dough doubled in size. A good trick is that you take a tiny piece of your dough, put it into a jar next to your main dough, and then you can watch it. All right, so we're done here with the bulk fermentation. We're gonna be preparing our bannetons. I'm gonna be baking 2 batards. We will be rice flouring them. Rice flour is excellent because it absorbs a lot of humidity and your dough is then not going to stick to the banneton, which is great. If your dough would stick to your banneton in the end, chances are your dough is going to be torn apart, and this is something you don't want. All right, let's remove the dough from the container. Wetting my hands one more time. I'm going to be doing one more coil fold just to help me getting it out of the container. And at the same time, this creates a little bit more strength. So regarding this recipe, what I was wondering a little bit, I mean, I was not kneading initially, I was just putting things together, but I've now added two more stretch and folds in between, and I've also done this one shaping. So there is still a little bit of work. Maybe I should make another version of this, like the super lazy version of like doing nothing. But here you can see how nicely the dough came together. I also have a version, by the way, of an overnight sourdough where it's pretty much the same. You don't apply any stretch and folds overnight. So that's our final dough. You can see those nice pockets of air already. I'm going to be splitting this now into two pieces. Chances are you don't have to do this in case you would just bake one. I always like to bake two breads if possible, because then I can change one parameter between each bake and see what's the winning combination. With a concise movement, cut the dough. You shouldn't be doing too many cuts. I'm now going to pre-shape, and there is the edge, so that's why I'm shaping in this direction at a 45-degree angle. Rotate your dough scraper over the non-floured surface. You might want to add flour, but please don't add any flour right now. With the flour, your dough simply won't stick to the surface, and this process wouldn't be possible. And have a look how nicely this is coming together. Pre-shaping helps to create a nice round ball, which will then make the actual shaping afterwards easier. And I can't stress enough how important it is to not use any flour. This really wouldn't work if you were using flour. Resist that urge. I've been there. I just want to make sure that you don't do the same mistakes. I've probably done it 100 times myself. And just look how nicely the dough is coming together. That's a good looking dough. We're now gonna let it bench rest for around 15 minutes and wait for it. You can see how it relaxed a little bit. Now, it enlarged. Gluten is a little bit more relaxed now, and now we're gonna start the shaping. And we're gonna be taking this dough, we're gonna be flattening it out right there. The top facing side is going to be downwards, and for that we need to use a little bit of flour because we don't want the top facing side to stick to the surface. So this is the only point where you add flour despite the initial kneading. Take it with your dough scraper, remove it. It's stuck at the bottom. That's completely normal. And now take it and flatten it out a little bit more. We want to create a bigger surface area. And for filming reasons, I'm now taking the second loaf, which is a little bit in the way, and I'm also already going to flip it over because I want you to see the actual shaping. All right, flattening it out, bigger area, and now I'm going to be taking the lower side and I'm going to tuck it into the middle, and then I'm going to tuck it down. Taking the right side, I'm tucking that in the middle. Left side will go over. I'm tucking that right down there. That creates strength. Top right side in the middle, top left side in the middle. Pinch it down. You want that to hold together. Now take the sides and pull them over. Imagine you wanted to stitch a wound. This method is called stitching. And now we're going to roll the dough on top of each other. We pull it outwards, pull it over, and then roll it in. Roll it in very, very tightly. This creates a lot of strength, and the strength makes the dough go upwards in the oven. I'm using the dough scraper now to tuck down the ends just a little bit so that it looks more nice and uniform. So this is the dough, probably 5 hours and 15 minutes in or so. I set myself a timer. One more time. And don't worry, I have failed so many times at shaping. it's just a method. It's just something you have to practice. And there's also many different methods of shaping. I'm just showing you this one because I find this one to be easy and reproducible. It's always about, imagine you wanted to glue something together. That's what we're doing. We're gluing the dough together. We want the dough to stick together. The stitching part, I actually find the hardest in the whole process, because there you tear the dough a little bit. It's not avoidable. The rolling over this step really creates a lot of strength, and I definitely recommend you to do that. And again, the dough scraper to do the final corrections. And I'll take that and put that in the banneton. Two beautiful looking loaves. I'm now going to let them rest at room temperature in the kitchen for around 2 hours, and then afterwards I'm going to put them in the fridge for another 2 hours. The fridge slows it down. Typically it would be 3 hours proofing for me at room temperature. I have around 20 degrees Celsius in my kitchen, but since I want to bake the bread when guests arrive, that's why I'm moving them a little bit to the fridge. The fridge basically slows down the whole process. If you have time, I would definitely recommend you to put your dough into the fridge for 24 hours. I find that to be a very, very good proofing time, and it's reproducible with the fridge. I'm putting that into a plastic bag because you don't want your dough to dry out now. You could also use a linen cloth if you have one, but plastic just works fine. I just reuse them between all of the bakes. And here they are 2 hours later. This phase is called proofing, and they are right now looking already nicely expanded in size. I will move them to the fridge now because my guests arrive in around 2 to 3 hours, and I want to slow down the process. Of course, at the start, the process is not that much slowed down. It takes a little bit. So yeah, there they are in the fridge, and let's go with the actual baking. I'm going to be showing you two methods. I'm going to be showing you baking on a stone, and we're going to be scoring the bread with the lamb, and then we're going to be spraying it with some extra water. So baking on the stone and then baking in a Dutch oven, and see for yourself what is the winner. I'm taking the dough out. That's been 2 hours at room temperature and probably another 2 hours in the fridge. The fridge also helps because it cools down the gases inside of your dough, and you get a much bigger oven expansion. The oven spring is just so much better on cold-proof doughs. I preheated the stone already to maximum temperature. It's very hot. And now we just have to take our dough and place our dough on top. Just flip it over gently, remove it, and you can see it did not stick to the banneton. That's very good. And now I'll show you how to score it at a 45-degree angle. Cut through your dough like that. You can add a decorative pattern if you want to. I always like this. Then we're going to spray it with water, and then we're going to let it bake. Water is really important during the first stages of the bake because the water prevents a crust from being formed, and this way your dough can rise much more in the oven. So soak it in water. And let's have a look at a small time lapse. You can see me spraying the dough every minute of the first 10 minutes of the bake. And this is also the time where your dough still rises. You need to add a lot of water, and you can see that a nice ear is opening up. That's what you want. That creates so much flavor and so much crunchiness. Let's go ahead with the second bread. I'll show you all of them in the end. Sorry for the small mess there in the kitchen. So into the banneton, into the Dutch oven. Now slowly remove the banneton. And another scoring attempt. Another pattern. It took me so much time to get scoring right. That's why I like to bake buns. You can practice so much more scoring with them. We will be covering the Dutch oven. I'm adding a little bit of extra water here for superior steam. Yeah. And basically the Dutch oven prevents this steam from going out, and that's why they are so good. They create so much steam. And let's look at the final breads. The Dutch oven one coming in first and the stone one second. Look at that nice looking ear on both of them. They're both two beautiful loaves, although I would say the Dutch oven one definitely had more oven spring vertically. Let's look at the crumbs now. I'm excited. First one, the stone baked one. Beautiful open crumb, a nice ear. You can see some pockets closer to the edge of the loaf. That's probably because we were missing some steam, but overall it turned out really nicely. The Dutch oven one, that's a wild crumb. You get this wild crumb when you do not stretch and fold that much, because basically you don't distribute the pockets of air that much. But overall, beautiful crumb, beautiful ear. I really like the vertical expansion on this loaf. It's been so much fun to bake this. This was my first attempt, and I'm just very, very happy how this turned out. And I'm definitely going to be baking something like this again. If you have any questions or any feedback for me, please feel free to send me a message. Thank you very much.